The morning of my sister's wedding, I woke up at 4 a.m. in a hotel room I had paid for and immediately started checking my emails. That's the thing about running your own company. The day doesn't wait for you to be ready for it. A vendor in Seattle needed a signature by 7. A new hire's onboarding paperwork had a discrepancy HR flagged overnight. I handled both before the sun came up. Then I set my phone face down on the nightstand and told myself, today is not about work. Today you are just a sister. I believed that for about 40 minutes. My mother knocked on my door at 5:15. She didn't say good morning. She said, the florist delivered the centerpieces to the wrong entrance and your sister is going to spiral if she finds out before the ceremony, so I need you to go handle it. Not my aunt. Not the wedding planner they'd hired. Me. I put my robe back on and went downstairs in hotel slippers to redirect a florist and 4 rolling carts of peonies. By 6 a.m., everything was in place. I went back upstairs, showered, and started getting dressed. My sister's name is Renata. She's 2 years younger than me, which made her 29 that April, and she has always been the kind of person who fills a room before she walks into it. People turn toward her the way plants turn toward a window. I used to think I was jealous of that. I spent a long time trying to figure out what I actually felt, and the honest answer is that I loved her for it, and it exhausted me in equal measure. I started my company when I was 26. It wasn't dramatic, no garage, no famous origin story. I had saved $40,000, taken out a small business loan, and opened a boutique staffing firm that specialized in placing operations talent in mid-sized logistics companies. It grew because I worked excessively and because I made good decisions, and because I genuinely understood what my clients needed before they could articulate it themselves. By the time of Renata's wedding, we had 31 full-time employees and contracts in 4 states. My family knew I had a business. They did not know what that meant in any concrete way. To my mother, I ran some kind of HR company. To my aunt, I did something with offices. To Renata, when she mentioned me at all, I was her older sister who was always working and never came home enough and had a lot going on, which was her way of explaining my absences in a tone that made them sound like a personal failing. I came home for every major holiday. I sent gifts. I called. I flew back when my grandmother had her hip replaced and stayed for 10 days and coordinated her entire discharge and home care setup because my mother was overwhelmed and Renata was in the middle of planning a bachelorette trip to Scottsdale. I am not saying that to make myself sound like a martyr. I'm saying it because it's the context. And the context matters. The wedding was at a vineyard about 40 minutes outside of Richmond, Virginia, where my family is from and where I no longer live. 300 guests. White tent. String lights. The kind of wedding that costs more than some people's first homes, which my parents took out a second mortgage to partially fund, and which I quietly contributed $22,000 toward because my mother had called me in February in tears and I didn't know how else to help. I did not tell Renata about the contribution. My mother asked me not to. She said Renata would feel bad, and I understood that, so I said nothing. The ceremony was genuinely beautiful. I stood at the end of the 3rd row and watched my sister walk toward a man named Griffin. Steady, kind-eyed, a civil engineer from Charlottesville who looked at her like she was something he couldn't quite believe was real, and I felt something loosen in my chest. She was happy. Whatever else was true, she was happy. The reception started at 5. I found my seat. Table 7, near the back, which I had not expected. I had assumed I would be closer to the front. Not out of ego, but because I was family, and the seating chart had been described to me as family near the front, friends and work people further back. I looked around table 7. I recognized my college roommate's sister, a neighbor from my parents' street I had met twice, and 4 people I didn't know at all. I sat down. I ordered a glass of Malbec from the server, and I told myself the seating chart was probably just logistics. Probably someone had needed to make room for Griffin's extended family. Probably it didn't mean anything. The cocktail hour speeches started. My uncle talked about Renata growing up. A childhood friend of Griffin's told an embarrassing story about a camping trip. Renata's maid of honor, a woman named Claire, who I had met a handful of times, gave a toast that was charming and well-paced, and made the whole room laugh. And then my mother stood up. She spoke for about 4 minutes. She talked about Renata's warmth, her creativity, the way she had always known how to bring people together. She told a story about Renata at age 7 organising a neighbourhood talent show, making flyers, collecting entry fees, donating the proceeds to an animal shelter. She said, "I always knew she was going to do something wonderful. I always knew she was going to make the people around her feel seen and valued. That is just who she is." I clapped. I meant it. My mother did not mention me, not once. Not to acknowledge I was there, not to say my daughters, not to say Renata and her sister. I was at the table near the back of the tent and I was invisible. Maybe I would have let it go. Maybe I would have finished my Malbec and dance during the first dance and helped myself to the salmon at the buffet and flown home to Atlanta on Monday with nothing more than a mild, familiar ache. But the evening had other plans. Around 7, while the buffet was being set up, I was standing near the entrance to the tent, just getting some air. My heels had started to blister and I ducked out for a few minutes. My mother found me. She didn't find me to check in. She found me because she needed something. "The place cards for the dessert table got mixed up," she said. "The labels are wrong and it's going to confuse the servers. Can you just go sort it out? You're good at this kind of thing." I looked at her for a moment. I was wearing a $340 dress. My hair had taken an hour. "Sure," I said. I went and sorted out the dessert table. It took about 10 minutes. When I came back inside, the buffet had opened and most people were in line. I found my spot at table 7 and sat back down. A few minutes later, Renata came by. She was doing a round of the tables, greeting guests. She stopped at table 7, hugged the neighbour, laughed at something one of Griffin's colleagues said. Then she looked at me. "Oh good, you're still here," she said. "Mum said you sorted out the dessert thing. Can you also check on the parking attendants? One of them told Dad they were leaving at 8, but we paid until 10. She said it the way you'd say it to a coordinator you'd hired. Casual." Moving on to the next thing before I'd finished processing the first, I said, "I'm a guest, Renata." She blinked. "I know. I'm just asking. You're asking me to go deal with the parking attendants. You're so good at that stuff." She said it with a smile, the kind that assumed the smile was enough. "I don't know who else to ask. You could ask the wedding planner." Her smile flickered. "She's already doing a lot." "So am I," I said. "I already moved the florist this morning. I fixed the dessert table. I'd like to eat dinner now." Renata's expression shifted into something I'd seen before, a particular rearrangement of her features that communicated that I was being difficult, that I was making something small into something large, that I was, as she had told me on at least 4 separate occasions over the years, a lot. "I'll ask Mum," she said, and walked away. My mother appeared 4 minutes later. She sat down in the empty chair next to me, which was not her seat. She leaned in close and said quietly, "Why are you making this difficult?" "I'm not making anything difficult," I said. "I drove 4 hours to be here. I've been handling things since 5 this morning. I'd like to have dinner." "It's one small thing. It's a pattern," I said, "and I think you know that." She pulled back slightly. Her expression was not angry. It was something sadder and more complicated than angry. It was the look of someone who understood exactly what I was saying and had decided, a long time ago, not to say it back. "Just keep the peace tonight," she said. She said it gently. That was the worst part. She said it gently, like she was asking me to carry something reasonable. I looked at her for a long moment. "Okay," I said. She patted my hand and went back to her table. I sat there for a minute. I drank the rest of my wine. I looked around the tent at the string lights and the peonies I had helped redirect that morning and the dessert table I had fixed an hour ago. And I thought, I gave $22,000 to make this happen. I am sitting at table 7 near the back. I have not been acknowledged once tonight. And now I'm being asked to manage parking. The server came by and I got another glass of wine and I ordered the salmon and I decided I was going to eat my dinner and I was going to dance and I was going to get through the rest of the night without saying anything else. I almost made it. The evening wore on. The cake was cut. The first dance happened. Renata and Griffin, Slow and Close, a song I didn't recognise but which was clearly meaningful to them and which made half the room cry. I did not cry. I felt something, but I couldn't name it cleanly. Around 9, Renata's maid of honour, Claire, came over and asked if I could help settle a dispute between the DJ and the venue coordinator about the volume. Renata said you handle things. Claire said, like it was a compliment. I said I really can't right now. And Claire looked briefly startled and then moved on. I got up and went to the bar. There was a small crowd there. I ordered water. Next to me, 2 of Griffin's groomsmen were talking about their jobs. One of them had just taken a new role at a firm in DC. The other was asking him about the transition. And then someone tapped my shoulder. I turned. It was a man in a dark grey suit, early 40s, with the look of someone who had come straight from somewhere important and hadn't fully unwound yet. He was holding the glass of bourbon and looking at me with an expression that was somewhere between recognition and surprise. He said, I'm sorry, are you Laurel Vance? I said yes. He put his hand out. Marcus Hendley. I don't know if you remember me. We met at the Regional Ops Conference in Charlotte, maybe 2 years ago. You were on the afternoon panel about restructuring mid-market supply chains. I remembered the conference. I had given that panel. I didn't remember him specifically, but that happened. You meet 100 people at those things. Of course, I said. Good to see you. I can't believe you're here, he said. I work with Griffin. We're at the same firm. I had no idea you two were connected. He married my sister, I said. Marcus's eyebrows went up. Really? He said it the way people say it when they're recalibrating something. I didn't know Griffin's wife had a sister who was. He stopped. Seemed to choose his words. I follow your company. We actually looked at you seriously last year when we were restructuring our ops talent pipeline. Your team came highly recommended. I said thank you. We ended up going with someone else for budget reasons, but honestly, I've thought about it since. He tilted his head slightly. I had no idea you were family. I said, not a lot of people do. I didn't mean it to land the way it landed. I wasn't performing anything. I was just telling the truth, and maybe the wine had made me more direct than I intended. Marcus looked at me for a moment. Then he said slowly, That's, He seemed to be processing something. Are you the one who's been helping with logistics all evening? Someone pointed you out earlier and said you were the coordinator. And I felt it move through me. Not rage. Something colder and quieter than rage. Something like recognition. No, I said. I'm a guest. He nodded. Right. A pause. I saw you fixing the dessert setup earlier. I assumed. I was helping, I said. It's a family thing. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Well, for what it's worth, Griffin talks about Renata constantly. I didn't know there was a sister. I want to say that carefully. I just mean, I know her name because Griffin says it every day, but I just mean I know her name because Griffin says every day, but I genuinely didn't know there was anyone else. He wasn't being cruel. He was being honest, and his honesty was its own specific kind of ache. I thanked him. We talked for a few more minutes about the conference, about an industry shift that was affecting both our worlds, and then someone called his name and he excused himself and went. I stood at the bar alone for a little while. Then I picked up my water and went back to table 7. At some point close to 10, Renata found me again. She was glowing the way brides glow, that specific combination of relief and joy and champagne that makes them look lit from the inside. She sat down across from me and reached over and took both my hands in hers. Thank you, she said, for everything, for being here. I looked at her. The flowers this morning, she said, and the dessert thing, and the dessert thing, and the dessert thing. Mom told me. You saved a whole day. I was glad to help, I said. You're always the one who fixes things, she said. You're so good at it. She smiled. It was a genuine smile. That was the thing, she meant it entirely. I don't know what we'd do without you. I held her hands. I looked at my sister, who had just married a good man in a tent full of people who loved her, funded in part by a cheque I had written and never mentioned. I thought about the morning, about table 7, about Marcus Hendley saying he didn't know there was anyone else. I said, "Congratulations, Renata. I really mean that." She hugged me. I hugged her back. She went off to find Griffin. I sat there for a moment with my hands folded on the table. The string lights were warm overhead. The band was playing something low and jazzy. Across the tent, I could see my mother dancing with my uncle, laughing at something, her head thrown back the way it does when she's really laughing. Around 10:30, I said my goodbyes. I hugged my parents. I hugged Griffin, whom I liked genuinely and who hugged back with the kind of solidity that made me think Renata had chosen well. I found Renata one more time and told her she looked beautiful, which she did. I was almost to the door when I heard my name. I turned. It was Griffin. He had followed me a little breathless, like he'd caught me just in time. "I need to say something," he said. I waited. "Marcus Henley came to find me about 20 minutes ago." He paused. "He told me who you are, what you've built. Honestly, he was kind of floored that I never mentioned you." I didn't say anything. "I didn't know," Griffin said. "Renata talks about her family and I knew you existed, but I didn't know." He stopped. "She talks about you like you're the responsible one, the one who handles things. She's never said the word company. She's never." He looked at me steadily. "I want you to know that I feel genuinely embarrassed right now. About the seating, about tonight, about all of it." I said, "You don't need to be embarrassed. You didn't plan the seating." "No," he said, "but it's my wedding, and you're my wife's sister, and you've been, from what Marcus described, you've been essentially staffing this event on top of being a guest." He shook his head slightly. "That's not right." I looked at him for a moment. This man I had met 4 times, who had just married my sister, who had come to find me in a parking lot because he thought something was not right. I said, "Take care of her." He said, "I will, I promise." I said good night and walked to my car. I drove back to the hotel with the windows down even though it was chilly, because I needed the air. I thought about what it means to be the one who handles things. I thought about how that becomes an identity so fixed that the people around you stop seeing it as a choice. They stop seeing it as something you do and start seeing it as something you simply are, like eye colour or height. Something that doesn't require acknowledgement because it requires no effort, because it comes naturally. I thought about my $22,000 and my morning with the florist and my evening at table 7. I thought about Marcus Hendley saying, "I didn't know there was anyone else." I thought about Griffin, standing in a parking lot in his wedding suit, saying, "That's not right." I sat in my hotel room for a long time before I slept. I didn't cry. I didn't feel angry exactly. I felt something more like clarity, the particular kind of clarity that comes when you finally understand that being capable is not the same as being valued, and that the people who rely on you most are sometimes the least equipped to tell the difference. I flew home to Atlanta the next morning. I had 3 messages waiting before I landed. My mother, asking if I'd gotten home safe. A vendor, asking about a contract renewal. And Griffin, a text. Just a few lines, saying that he and Renata were going to come visit me in Atlanta before the end of the year. That he wanted to see the office. That he hoped that was okay. I replied, "That would be great. Come whenever." I meant it. Some things don't resolve cleanly. Some things you carry and sort through slowly, alone, over a long time. But sometimes, in the middle of a night that felt like it was only taking from you, someone unexpected looks up and sees you clearly. And that doesn't fix anything. But it's not nothing either. It's a start. I thought about that night more times than I expected to. Not with anger. That part faded faster than I thought it would. What stayed was something quieter. A question I kept turning over. How do you become invisible to the people who have known you the longest? I think the honest answer is that it happens gradually, and then all at once. It starts when you're the one who steps up. You handle the hard phone call, you show up early, you fix the thing no one else wants to deal with, and at first people are grateful. They say so, but over time, and this is the part no one warns you about, the gratitude quietly converts into expectation. You stopped being someone who chose to help. You became someone who simply does. And choices don't need to be acknowledged. They don't need to be seen. They just need to be acknowledged. They don't need to be seen. They just need to be available. That is what happened to me. And I'm not sure I can place all the blame on my mother or on Renata because I played a role in building it. Every time I fixed something without saying a word, I added another brick to a wall that eventually made me disappear. I paid $22,000 and said nothing. I moved florists at 5 in the morning and said nothing. I sorted dessert labels in a $340 dress and said almost nothing. The silence wasn't humility, it was, I think, a hope that the right people would notice without being told, that the cold, that being capable would eventually be enough to be valued. It wasn't. And that's not a tragedy. It's just a lesson that arrived later than it should have. What I took from that night, from Table 7, from Marcus Hendy's surprise, from Griffin standing in a parking lot looking genuinely embarrassed, is that integrity doesn't require an audience. But relationships do require honesty. Those are two different things, and I confused them for years. I thought staying quiet was the same as being gracious. It isn't. Staying quiet when you are being diminished isn't grace. It's just a habit that costs you, slowly, over a long time. The moment I said to Renata plainly and without drama, "I'm a guest," that was the most honest thing I'd said to my family in years. Not cruel, not performative, just true. And it mattered, even though it didn't change the seating chart or undo the morning. Griffin texted me because he was a decent person who had been kept in the dark and didn't like what he saw when the light finally came on. That wasn't luck. That was the natural result of a lifetime of real work meeting a moment of unexpected visibility. I didn't manufacture that, but I also didn't hide from it. I think about that sometimes when I'm tired, when a deal falls through or a hire doesn't work out, or I'm sitting in an airport at 6 a.m. wondering what exactly I'm building and for whom. I think about the fact that the people who saw me clearly that night were the ones with the least reason to protect my feelings. Marcus didn't owe me anything. Griffin had met me 4 times, and yet they were the ones who looked up. That tells you something worth knowing. The people closest to us often see us through the story they've already written. Everyone else just sees what's actually there. I'm still working on letting that be enough.